Good. So good morning, everyone, students, lecturers. Thank you for the kind invitation that you gave me, and I'm glad to be here. Glad to be back at the university. I did some projects with master students, I think 2 years ago before COVID breaks, but I'm glad to be back, and I hope I would renew the experience sometime soon. My name is Amreesh. Phokeer. I work for the Internet Society, and today my talk is going to be about cybersecurity implications of the Russia-Ukraine conflict. I crossed out security because I'm going to talk more generally about the cyber implications. So let's start. You already gave a very good introduction. I joined the Internet Society, which is a global nonprofit since last year, working on different projects, including measuring the internet, so understanding the health of the internet from different aspects, whether we are adopting the newest best practices, the newest technologies, what are the impediments, so on and so forth. I do a lot in what we call routing security. So we have that protocol called the Border Gateway Protocol, which has a lot of flaws, and we try to inform network operators how to improve their security through different security mechanisms. I'm also involved in what we call internet peering. We will see why peering is important. Peering is having network operators get together and exchange traffic in a more efficient and less costly way. And we try to, as much as possible, to encourage people to adopt the peering and interconnection best practices. And I'm also involved very recently in what we call the LEO, low Earth, sorry for the typo, orbit satellites. You must have heard about Starlinks. So the Internet Society is currently investigating about what are the benefits or the drawbacks of Starlink, because as you know, there are many benefits to the low Earth orbit project, because it can bring internet access to areas where it is usually difficult to provide access, but at the same time it creates a lot of pollution in the space and things like that. So all those things we are currently researching, and probably soon we will have a position on this project. On this technology, rather. I worked at Afrinic before as a research manager for almost 10 years, on very similar topics, but mostly focusing on the African networks. And I'm also involved in a lot in the academic community. I participate in as a technical program committee member on a few conferences, such as Internet Measurement Conference, Passive and Active Measurement Conference, and TMA. And I also had the chance to work with Amar 2 years ago to organize the AFRICOM 2020, which we did together with Middlesex, but unfortunately it was virtual. But nonetheless, I think it was a good event. So back to the Internet Society. I will just move this. Yeah. Back to the Internet Society, I mentioned we are a global NGO. We were founded in 1992 by the Internet pioneers. You might have heard of Binton Cerf, who is the inventor of the TCP/IP. So all these people at the beginning said that, okay, why don't we create a nonprofit that will impart all the good things of the internet, and also make sure that we work in such a way that we keep the internet open and accessible to everyone, and also using the latest and the best technologies out there. So our motto is like we stand for a better internet. So we have a global presence of community of members. So we have individual members. Anyone can become a member of the Internet Society. And we have also corporate members. And our strength really is in the network of chapters. So we have chapters in many countries. We had a chapter in Mauritius, but unfortunately it went dormant. So maybe I would encourage you to find some information. I would gladly help you to how to rejuvenate this chapter and also benefit from all the activities that the Internet Society does, from providing grants to providing training on technical or less technical aspects of the internet. So if you want to do research, you can apply for grants. If you can also become what we call an early career fellow, where we would actually give you some training and also make you meet one of all the internet pioneers like Vinton Cerf, also participate in this program to establish some sort of interactions. So I would really encourage you to participate. So what we do, as I mentioned, at the Internet Society, we provide leadership in policy issues. So policy could be, let's say a country is doing an internet shutdown. So we would write some policy briefs to say what are the drawbacks of doing an internet shutdown. For example, it is cutting access to the internet. A lot of people, especially in developing regions, they rely on the internet for their day-to-day business. For example, someone working in the informal sector might be using WhatsApp for their day-to-day business, but this is important for them. So if you cut internet access, you might be cutting the access to their funding, and this can have dire consequences. So we advocate for an open internet, so based on internet standards, which means that so as you know, the internet is based on internet protocols which are open and which anybody can contribute to, and which is also openly accessible. So as much as possible, we want to keep the internet open through open technologies. We promote internet technologies that matter. For example, the switching to IPv6 is an important move that we have to do as IPv4 is depleting. We have to, for example, protect the DNS system by adding a security layer called DNSSEC. So these sort of technologies. We develop infrastructure. So we help build technical community in the different countries. So for example, in Mauritius, we had built a Mauritius Internet Exchange Point. As I mentioned, an exchange point is an important infrastructure which allows operators to connect to each other, because otherwise what would happen, they would need to connect to a foreign operator, send traffic outside of Mauritius for the traffic to come back to Mauritius. So the Internet Exchange Points allows better interconnection within the country. And then we finally also recognize industry leaders. We have what we call the John Postel Award, where John Postel is also one of the internet pioneers. So we provide awards to people who are doing good things, promoting the openness of the internet or building infrastructure in their communities. So back to our talk today, I thought this talk would be quite timely because we are right in the midst of a war, unfortunately. Yeah, we at the Internet Society definitely do not condone any sort of violence, and we know that this war is being very violent and people leave their house, sometimes even at the expense of their lives. So what's happening in Ukraine is really bad, and we provide our full support to the Ukrainian community. So here is just a summary of cyber events that happened. As you know, Russia invaded Ukraine on the 24th of February, and this after building a lot of their military forces for several months. But at the same time, you would be interested to know that they have also countries such as the NATO countries and their allies, and the whole game, I would say the whole game was actually to control the information flow. So to control the pipelines, trying to cut internet in some regions, and also disrupt the information flow and try to propagate fake news, because this is how this is part of the new way of doing war, basically. So there have been various techniques, multiple known and unknown attack vectors were used. For example, ransomware, as you know, viperware has been used a lot. Data leaks and cyber espionage. Data leaks, so you would see that the attacks are coming from both sides. So the Ukrainian are also retaliating. And very recently, I think yesterday or 2 days ago, the anonymous group released a statement saying that they have released 28 gigabytes of worth of data of the central bank of Russia. So it's out public. You have so many information on contracts, on deals, on everything involved. And yeah, this will have a snow effect and will be ongoing like this, so on and so forth. And maybe one landmark event that happened is that the EU and the US also put sanctions on Russia and also on the Russian internet. So we will see later on the section that happened. So one of the first things that we decided to do at the Internet Society is to see how resilient the Ukrainian internet is. So the war has been going on for like a month now, but we haven't heard about big outages in Ukraine, and that's true actually. Of course, they have started to bombard buildings hosting data centers, which is actually breaking internet in some parts of the country. But in general, the Ukrainian internet has been quite resilient, and this is thanks to the very good infrastructure that they had right at the beginning. So they have, as you can see on the map, it is the cable infrastructure, which covers most of the country, and also all the orange dots are the exit points. Because let's say a few exit points are controlled by the Russian authorities or military, the other exit points are still accessible for them to send traffic out of the country and also receive traffic from other networks. But on top of that, they have a very strong infrastructure itself in terms of internet exchange point. For example, I was talking about those infrastructure that allows operators to connect to each other and exchange traffic locally. So they have 20 of these for Ukraine. They have more than 50 data centers and also more than 30 network operators. So internet service providers, basically. And that's good because the more diverse your market is, so it means that you have a low market concentration. It is more difficult to actually shut down the whole of the internet of Ukraine because it is so diverse, it is so well connected to every different places. And this is a good example that many countries needs to follow. Market concentration, if we take the example of Mauritius, not to bad name anyone, but our incumbent operator Mauritius Telecom holds 75% of the market, and 20% goes to the other operator. The thing is, what happens in, let's say, Mauritius Telecom has a cable break, which happens in many countries. So it might happen that 75% of the population do not have access to the internet. So the more variety we have, the more diversity we have, it's better in general. So far it has been good, but yesterday the Ukraine telecom connectivity dropped because of cyber attacks. So this is now happening. They hit their routing infrastructure. So for a lot of their customers, internet was not accessible anymore. And as I mentioned, in the areas of fighting, there are regional and localized outages. I've even seen pictures of people of their building being bombarded. They are trying to fix the cable, the fiber connection. So kudos to those people who are actually working in very difficult circumstances. There was a call from the I think Minister of IT from Ukraine to Elon Musk to provide Starlink satellites and dishes, and he he actually sent more than 100 dishes, which is providing some level of connectivity, but of course it's very limited. But maybe it is proving something that in areas of war, maybe this technology can be very useful, and that is something to be considered. So now let's see the other side of the coin, the sanction on Russia. So again, the Russian internet is also quite robust, and I don't know if you have heard before, but the Russian authorities have, for quite a while now, they have started talking about shutting down the internet, shutting down the Russian internet, just to as an exercise, as a drill. We have only heard rumors of it, but it never happened. And most probably it never happened because it is very difficult to operate such a shutdown on the Russian internet. Because as you see on this graph here, the red dots are local Russian operators, and the blue dots are operators that are outside of Russia. And what we see here, there are as many blue dots as red dots. So which means that local networks are also connecting to foreign networks in such a way that it would be very difficult to shut down with a kill switch the whole of the internet. But what we are also seeing is there are 1, 2, 3, maybe 4 or 5 Russian operators. These are called the internet service providers. So they are like 4 or 5 main there that is providing access to all the red dots to the smaller networks in Russia. And maybe it might be easier maybe for the Russian authorities to contact those 5 bigger red dots and say, okay, it's time now to shut down the internet. It might happen. So those big operators, they themselves, they need internet access. And how do they get that internet access is to talk to the green dots, which are called tier 1 operators. The tier 1 operators are in a hierarchy. They are the top most one. There are a handful of them. Maybe we have maybe 10 or 15, not so many, but they are connected to most of the bigger networks of the internet. And what happened? On March 4, Lumen and Cogent, which are American companies, decided to stop their service to Russia. Fine, which means that Russia cannot access the internet through those providers, but eventually they will be able to access the internet through other providers. You have many other providers as well, but this can have an impact. For example, it means that Russian networks now have less options to send their traffic abroad, and foreign networks have also less options to contact Russian network. Eventually, this can have an impact on latency, right? So the aim of the sanction was to somehow isolate Russia, but by doing so, you're also isolating a lot of people in Russia, who are also against the war. So we need perhaps to strike a balance. Is it actually good to shut down the internet even for a country which is waging war against someone else? Probably not. So what have been the impacts of the sanctions? You have big companies such as Google and Twitter that have stopped services, maybe for a good reason here, because they do not want Google or Twitter through their ad system to be participating to the misinformation campaign by Russian authorities or by Russian news agencies. We have seen big companies such as Amazon, Apple, PayPal, Netflix stopping their services. Actually, even with the banking sanctions, SWIFT is not there anymore. The whole payment system also has stopped functioning. And I've heard Russia is now has moved to UnionPay, which is a Chinese provider of online payment. So on March 11, what happened is the London Internet Exchange Point, which is a very big internet exchange point and which has what they call members from almost all over the world, and they are very popular because they are connected to the major networks and the major content providers such as Google, Facebook, Apple, all of them. They decided to cut the services to two operators, Megaphone and Rostelecom. And we have seen how traffic shifted basically, because now Russian operators do not have direct access to the set of peers that they usually had before. One thing we also noticed is that certification authorities. So whenever you visit a website using HTTPS, you have a certificate. So those certificates are issued by certificate authorities. Some of them decided to stop the renewal. So let's say you want to go on an e-government service of Russia, you couldn't access it anymore because the certificate expired and it was not renewed. So what did the Russians decide to do? They decided, okay, you guys do not want to renew my certificate. I will create my own certificate authority. So they created their own certificate authority. But now it takes time for a newly created certificate authority to be accepted by browsers. It is a very lengthy process because there's an element of trust and everything. So they say, okay, if you want now to access, let's say, local e-government services, you have to use Russian-made browsers. They have a browser called Yandex browser, which comes pre-installed with the certificate. So now they are encouraging people in Russia to use their own created browsers to access those local websites. But this has an issue. If someone is providing you a browser with a custom-made certificate, it means that eventually they can also decrypt your traffic, because they are the owner of that root certificate at the end of the day. The Internet Society has raised red flags many times, including the case in Mauritius, where at some point we were discussing about having a proxy server to decrypt traffic. And the way to do that was to actually have to install a certificate in your browser. So this is completely bad because it breaks the end-to-end principle of the internet. It breaks many other principles such as confidentiality, privacy, and so on and so forth. So what we are seeing by isolating Russia is that we are encouraging Russia to create what we call the splinternet, not the internet, but the splinternet, which is made of fragments of networks. Sometimes they will be able to connect to each other because they share some common protocols, but in many cases, probably not. And we have great examples such as the Great Firewall of China, where they say, okay, if you stay within the Chinese internet, you're safe. But we do not know what's happening behind the doors and whether there is eavesdropping, state-sponsored surveillance and things like that. So the internet has succeeded because of its open nature, of its unrestricted access and the use of common protocols. So if now the Chinese say they want to build their own, using their own routing protocol or using, for example, new IP, they started talking about new IP, which is a completely different set of protocols and not compatible with the current internet protocol. Or they decide to install their own DNS root system. So this is fragmenting the internet and now creating different pieces, fragments of internet, and breaking basically what we have built and what we have put so much effort building a decentralized system of networks. So this is why it is important to protect the core properties of the internet, which are having an accessible and having an accessible infrastructure with a common protocol. So the common protocol in our case is TCP/IP or IP. For the routing protocol, we use BGP, which is the common language all network operators will speak. For DNS, everyone knows there is only one route, and we will all use the same route. It must remain decentralized because it is a networks of networks that work independently, but at the end of the day together. And it needs to stay neutral and a general purpose internet, so that anyone can come and add a piece of the internet and build the internet, make it grow organically. Here on the right, you have a set of properties that the internet needs to be, and we need to fight so that it remains as is, open, reliable, resilient, easy, and with unrestricted access, collaborative, and so on. And by refusing access to Russian networks, as we have seen, it crosses out a lot of these critical properties. So the threats, by disconnecting Russia, we are disconnecting the Russian people itself, as mentioned. Maybe a big majority of Russian people are against the war and they need access to information. They need to see how the world is reacting, but the world also needs to have access to what's happening in Russia, or their protests, or people fighting against this authoritarian regime, so on and so forth. The threat is also that by disconnecting Russia, this is going to set a precedent, and maybe more of this will come in the future. So splintering the internet along geographical, political, or commercial boundaries. So the recommendation is really to resist calls to cut people off the internet, and prioritize action that will help keep the internet running, even for the Russian people. This is my final slide about what our CEO mentioned, Andrew Sullivan. He says that the internet is allowing people who would otherwise be silenced to speak. And our chair mentioned that without the internet, the rest of the world would not know of atrocities happening in other places. And without the internet, ordinary citizens of many countries wouldn't know what was being carried out in their name. I have put a few references. So if you're, for example, interested in the more cybersecurity aspects of all the different types of attacks that happen, also the mitigation techniques, I put the links here. I put also our own analysis, the Internet Society analysis of disconnecting Russia, and so on and so forth. On the last link here, we have a rolling blog where we keep putting latest information about what we see from the networks of either a network being shut down, or we see a protocol which is no more accessible, or we also work with an organization which works in the space of internet censorship. So we have live information about which services are being censored in which countries. That's it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do we have any questions?
Yes.
Any questions from anyone online?
Recording stopped.
Right in the chat.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yes. How is this going to affect us in Mauritius?
The question is how it's going to affect us in Mauritius.
Yeah. So same considerations. Mauritius, we are also part of the global internet, and the threats that are there for the global internet can also happen in Mauritius. So I talked about having a resilient internet, having multiple connections to other countries. So Mauritius being an island, it is important that we have a very robust submarine cable ecosystem, because let's say there is a cable break, it is very easy for Mauritius to go offline. We are almost no more using satellite communications anymore, so most of the traffic is going through submarine cables, and we know submarine cables can easily be broken. You have the example of Tonga, which is an island. There was a volcano, the cable broke, and for a lot of time, the whole country was out of the internet. But this is one talking about infrastructure, but you have also those threats coming from policies, whether it is government mandated policies or otherwise. For example, breaking the end-to-end principle of the internet, putting a proxy server to decrypt traffic is a really bad idea. It undermines the privacy of users. It undermines confidentiality. So this can happen anywhere, and it could have happened in Mauritius as well. So we need to be vigilant about how things are evolving.
Okay, thank you. Like there are many part of your speech which I really didn't understand because I'm just a first-year cybersecurity student. But this is a fresh perspective you gave to us, and we have to find out more about all these things. Thank you. Thanks a lot for your presentation.
It was a pleasure.
Any more questions? Any more questions from those on campus? Any more online? Yes.
The African continent. That's a good question. So of course we have all these economics implications of the war on Russia, where you have surges in the price of gas, for example, and if African countries are importing gas, maybe there would be an increase in the price. But now thinking of the cyber implications of this war, so we know for a fact that in African countries there are a lot, or a few rather, authoritarian countries, and there is a trend about internet shutdowns, either because of war or because even during exam times, some countries would completely just shut down the internet. So sanctions. Countries in Africa had sanctions before. Sudan, for example, had sanctions from the US. So maybe this will raise back all these all questions or all demons, I would say. If now they are applying sanctions on the internet for Russia, would they apply sanctions on the internet for African countries? And we know for a fact that in many African countries, access to the internet is limited or actually already costly. So putting sanctions on African countries will make the situation even worse for the locals.
One more question. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So what I've read is that so the Russian cyber criminals are not only attacking Ukraine to shut down the internet, but they're also attacking allies countries or NATO countries. So you might have heard, I think it was during the US presidential election, how Russians influence the elections. So cyber criminals can have actually quite large influence on things that you might not be thinking of. So yeah, so that's why it's important for countries to be aware of those cyber attacks and how to put all the mitigation around it to reduce the effect. Yeah.
Any further questions? Can I have one on just maybe the importance of routing security? Maybe talk a bit more about that and some of the things that the Internet Society are doing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's a good example because yesterday itself, Twitter was hijacked in Russia. So what happened is that obviously maybe for reasons that we all know, they do not want the Russian population to have access to Twitter. So they decided to block Twitter. So the big red operators, the red circles that we have seen, they decided to block Twitter. And the way they do that is so the internet works on a protocol called BGP, which a network says, okay, I am network X, come send your traffic to me. So what happened is that the Russian network said, I am Twitter, send your traffic to me, and then they would black hole the traffic so that users in Russia cannot access to Twitter. But what happened is they also leaked that what we call that announcement to the many places on the internet, and a lot of neighboring countries, for example, couldn't access Twitter during that short span of time. But at the Internet Society, we have a program called Manners, which is mutually agreed norms on routing security, in which we try to push for the best practices in terms of routing security called RPKI, Resource Public Infrastructure. And actually, the Twitter is using this type of technology, which is a cryptography supported technology. So thanks to that, the outage on Twitter wasn't that big. Maybe 10 or 12 years ago, there was a very similar incident with Pakistan Telecom trying to block YouTube. They did the exact same thing. They hijacked the YouTube network and say that if you want to access YouTube, come to my network. And this is what happened. But they also leaked that announcement, and it went around the world. And I think the whole of Asia couldn't access YouTube for 1 or 2 hours. Yeah, so thanks to the routing security mechanisms that we at the Internet Society are pushing for adoption, Twitter was able to mitigate this hijack.
Thank you. Any further questions? Anyone online? Okay, thanks so much again for your discussion.